So I'm starting up a new business this year around this YouTube channel called Full Stack Founder. And one of the first things that my new business needs is a website. And I just spent the past 7 days building and launching the new website at fullstackfounder.co. In fact, I actually just pushed it live for the very first time last night. I pulled a late one last night. So in this video, I'm actually going to walk through all the steps that I went through to build and ship this thing, including showing you all the tools that I use, my creative process. I'll show you all of it, starting from writing the copy for the site and planning out the sitemap and the navigation and how I actually changed the name and then grabbed the domain name. Then I'll show you my process for designing in HTML with the help of Tailwind CSS. And then I hopped into Figma to work out the logo for Full Stack Founder. I'll show you how I went about choosing the brand colors, and I've actually got 2 free tools that I love to use to make that process easy and fast. Then we get a bit more technical where I implemented a content management system, or CMS. The one that I love to use is called Statamic. I'll tell you why I like that one and how I configured it to run the site on Full Stack Founder. I'll show you how I wired up a few forms to capture email addresses and leads and inquiries through the site. Then some important details like setting up the site for proper SEO structure and implementing analytics to track my traffic. And then finally, we'll get into how I deployed the site, first to a staging server, and finally deploying the live site. Now, before we dive in, there's something really important that I want to talk about, and that is striking a balance between speed and the details. Because a project like this, designing a whole new site and brand and building it and launching it for a new business, that's a big time-consuming project. And on the one hand, it's super important because I need a home base on the internet for my new business. But on the other hand, a project like this is actually a pretty huge distraction for me because during the week that I worked on this website, I was not able to do the other things that need to be happening if I'm going to keep pushing this business forward, like recording new videos, editing them, promoting things on social media, sending out email newsletters. All of that sort of had to go on pause while I worked on this big creative project. So I wanted to get it done as quickly as possible. And what inevitably happens is there are lots of little details that sort of crop up along the way that make us think, you know what, that's not that important. We can do that after we go live. I'll deal with it later. But here's the thing about those small details. The smaller they are, the less likely that I'm ever going to actually find the time to do them later. And if enough of those things add up, it can actually make a real negative impact for the business. One example of that is optimizing for SEO. It's not all that time consuming to implement the proper SEO structure and optimizations for a new website, but it's a little bit tedious and it's the kind of thing that visitors won't actually see when they look at the website. So it's really easy to push that off and say like, I'll deal with that in a few weeks. But then in a few weeks, I'm busy working on videos and working on products and doing all these other things. And then months go by and my website is not as optimized for search traffic as it should be. And that comes at the cost of real traffic, real visitors, real customers for my business. So I actually think that it's really important to make the quick decision now while I'm in the middle of this creative project to get those details right and to make sure that these essential items are included in the project so that I can just touch it once and not have to touch it again later. And as I share all of my work with you here, I'm also going to walk through my strategic thought process in how I struck that balance between moving quickly and making sure that I ship all the little important details. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Oh, one more thing. I'm not going to have enough time to get too far into the weeds on everything that I'm going to show you here. So if there's anything that you would like me to dive deeper on or show you more of the process, send a comment down below and I will make another video about that. Okay, let's go. All right, so before I did anything else, I started with a blank page where I started writing the copy for this website. I like to use Notion for this because it's both a writing tool and an organizational tool where I can start to organize the different sections and the sitemap and the navigation of how this website should come together. And actually, I think this step is maybe the most important step in the entire process because the writing of the words that will go on the website, that is my creative spark. Because the most important thing when you're writing copy for a marketing website, for a product, or for your business is to think about who are you writing to. I like to think about one single person who will be reading the words that will go on the page. And I try to put myself in their shoes as much as possible. It helps that this whole business for Full Stack Founder is based on my own experience and the journey that I went on transitioning to become a full stack product designer, developer, full stack founder. In some ways, I like to write the copy for a website to a younger version of myself, especially if it's based on my experience. And what I'm doing here is I'm developing the value proposition. I'm forming the words that should come together to take the reader on a journey, to make them want to learn more, make them want to subscribe, make them want to join me in my community here, and ultimately down the road, somebody who might buy my products. And in fact, in this case, when I was writing the copy for this website, for Full Stack Founder, I actually didn't even have the name Full Stack Founder yet. I started under a different name. And when I started writing the words and thinking about who I'm writing to and thinking about the journey that I want to take that person on, that's when it actually clicked. Full stack designer, full stack developer, full stack products, founders of businesses, full stack founder. It started to come together. That's literally how it happened. And that's what quickly led me to the decision of, you know what? That's the name. Let's go with that. Let's see if I can get a domain name for it. It just works. So I grabbed fullstackfounder.co. Unfortunately, the .com was taken. And before I fully settled on this name, I had to go through a couple of important checks to make sure that this name is actually a viable option for me. First, I Googled around just to see if anyone was actually building a business around the exact name of Full Stack Founder, and I didn't find anything out there that's too significant. Then I checked to see if I could reserve the name Full Stack Founder on social media sites. The most important one for me was this YouTube channel, and I found that I was able to reserve the handle Full Stack Founder. Next, I started designing the site, actually just the homepage, in HTML. I skip doing a detailed mock-up in Figma or something else, and I go straight into code with HTML and Tailwind CSS. So this is just a plain index.html page, and I can view it in the browser here. This is just looking locally. Now, as I'm showing it here, it looks very similar to what the final version looks like. Here's the final version. But when I designed this, it looked a lot more rough. For instance, the colors were not in place yet. A lot of the structure moved around quite a bit. Now, I use Tailwind CSS on just about every website and app that I design. It's fantastic for designing in the browser. And I've got a separate video all about the surprising benefits of using Tailwind CSS beyond just rapidly building, as they call it here in their homepage. I'm also a member of tailwindui.com. That's the UI components library that Tailwind Labs has released. And I used some of these components partly as like inspiration for ideas to start to rapidly put together the layout. And in some cases, I actually took some of their code snippets that they provide. For example, here is their collection of hero sections. The hero section is this top area up here. I believe I was looking at this one. There's actually like a darker version of it down here. I actually used that as my starting point. And you can see how they have like the background image. And in my static HTML design here, I was originally working with a background image, and I tried all sorts of things. I actually ended up going with sort of like a nighttime sky gradient thing, which is done all in CSS. So I looked to these components to sort of get me going on the layout. Here's a look at my actual HTML for this page. Now, knowing that this is not my final code base, I simply just pulled in Tailwind CSS using their CDN, and the Tailwind config I just placed right here on the page. Obviously, in the final version of the site where I'm running Statamic and Laravel, it's all fully installed in the code base. But here, this is just a simple HTML page, and I'm trying to get up and running quickly. For fonts, you can see this line of CSS. That's calling in Typekit, which was the previous name of what is now known as Adobe Fonts. That's the service that I use to power the fonts for Full Stack Founder. They've got a great wide selection of fonts to choose from and implement. This is my project for Full Stack Founder, where I'm using the Paralucent font and a couple of weights on it. And then I use the Alta font for the serif body text. And then I defined just a few base layer styles. Again, these would go in a separate CSS file in the final project, but I'm just putting all this stuff right here in the head. And for the icons, I like to use this service called Font Awesome. They've got a huge selection of icons, and they make it really easy to implement on an HTML site. So for the icons, I have little icons here, these little arrows, these social brand icons, all icons that come from Font Awesome. And these little I tags are the individual icons. Now the content itself, as you can see, is just static HTML, nothing dynamic here. All I'm doing is laying out the page. Most of this is the final copy that I ended up putting on the page. Some of it is just placeholder, again, just to get the styles and the spacing right, because I know that later this content will be dynamic. Now, from a process standpoint, what you're viewing here is the HTML page with all of the final colors applied. But when I actually worked on it, for most of that time, I had not yet picked the final colors. I was basically just using the default colors that came with Tailwind UI. I was not caring so much about colors yet. That came a bit later in the process. Now, the home page is where I spend a lot of time and energy in this process, because I think it's one of those high impact areas that deserves this level of focus. First of all, the homepage is a make or break moment for every new visitor that comes across my brand and my website and my business. From the headline to the branding to the message, if that doesn't connect right away, then the visitor will just hit that back button and go away, maybe forever. So this is where first impressions actually matter. The other reason why I spend a lot of time and creative energy on the homepage is because this is what sets up the look and feel and the structure for the rest of the website. Once we have the homepage dialed in, all the rest of the pages start to become a lot easier and faster to produce. Now, I don't consider logo design to be one of my top full stack founder skills, but I can get by. It does mean that designing a logo takes me more time than I would like it to. I spent several days working out the design for the full stack founder logo. So here I am in Figma. This is where I worked out the actual logo mark. And I've got a couple of artboards here. One is where I just defined the colors, and I'll get into the colors separately. I actually did that last. So first I worked out the logo mark itself, just using sort of like a gray and white color palette. And then I filled in the actual final colors a little bit later. This is the main purpose of Figma here for me, is to actually work out the logo mark. It's pretty simple. I like the idea of like stacking the words full stack on top of founder, kind of a play on words there a little bit. I went with just a text-based mark here, no other icons or anything, wrapped it in like sort of this block rectangle shape, which is actually just two rectangles really, which I used the union tool to bring together into a single box. And then I doubled it up to give it this sort of like shadow. The text, it uses the same brand typeface that I'm using on the website, which is Paralucent, except this one is Paralucent condensed, whereas the typeface on the website is just Paralucent. The condensed, is just a little bit more condensed, and it works a little bit better when it's placed in a logo like that. What else? Oh, and I used a plugin called Skew. So this little plugin allows me to, I'll select the group, allows me to skew whatever is going on here. So it started out, looking like that, just straight rectangles with some rounded corners. And then I skewed it. I played around with this quite a bit. So that's the logo mark, and I exported it. The version that is used on the website is an SVG. So that's, nice and efficient to load. And as it scales on different screen sizes, we don't see any like blurring or distortion. So I like the SVG for that. The other thing that I did later on after I finalized the colors was I created the open graph graphic. So I placed the logo in the center. This is 1200 by 630. And so this open graph image is in the website meta. So let's look at the source. I'll show you that. So whenever I share the website on, Twitter, X, or any other social platforms, this is the graphic that will show up. So I always want to have that in place. And then also in Figma, I created a small favicon image. Super simple, just a little version of the logo itself, the two blocks, and then I exported that out as a PNG. Use a little free tool called Favicon Generator, and it looks like this. And you just like upload the image, and then it exports out the code, like the different tags and the different screens and the different sizes for the image to show up on the website. All right, colors. So as I said, I worked on the site structure and the logo, but I hadn't yet settled on the exact colors that would define the brand of these things. So I spent a bit of time dialing in the brand colors for Full Stack Founder. My starting point for choosing colors was a dark blue because I wanted to find the same blue that you see on the back wall behind me here in these videos. Since this YouTube channel and these videos and the thumbnails for these videos are a main focal point of the website and this entire business for Full Stack Founder, I wanted it all to be cohesive. So I started with that dark blue, and then I looked for complementary colors that I can use for action items like buttons and links, and a highlight color that could also work well. I use two free tools for this. The first is called coolors.co, coolors.co. This is such a cool tool because I can quickly generate complementary color palettes. And what I really like is how I can lock in a single color and then continue to hit the spacebar to generate complementary colors to that color. Then once I've settled on the final colors for the brand, I use another free tool called uicolors.app. And this one lets me generate multiple shades for those colors, and then it generates the actual code that I can drop into the Tailwind CSS config file when I'm defining those colors in my website. All right, now with most of the branding and creative work and the design work out of the way, now we get a bit more technical and start to build out the rest of the site and implement a content management system. For that, I turned to Statamic. I started using this just last year, and I really love it because it's the perfect combination of get my hands dirty in the code, in the design, the CSS, the JavaScript, the templates. I can fully control everything about it. I love that it works just like any other static site generator for a website, but it also has a really, really great interface for managing content on the website. I'll be using that, of course, when I publish things on the website. But more importantly, whenever I hire an assistant or a marketing person or a writer, they'll need to actually log into the CMS, the interface. They're not going to be able to use code or terminal to push changes to the website. I'm fine with making updates directly in code, but my team, they need a nice, easy to use interface, and Statamic is that perfect combination of both. All right, now with most of the branding and creative work and the design work out of the way, now we get a bit more technical and start to build out the rest of the site and implement a content management system. For that, I turned to Statamic. I started using this just last year, and I really love it because it's the perfect combination of get my hands dirty in the code, in the design, the CSS, the JavaScript, the templates. I can fully control everything about it. I love that it works just like any other static site generator for a website, but it also has a really, really great interface for managing content on the website. I'll be using that, of course, when I publish things on the website, but more importantly, whenever I hire an assistant or a marketing person or a writer, they'll need to actually log into the CMS, the interface. They're not going to be able to use code or terminal to push changes to the website. I'm fine with making updates directly in code, but my team, they need a nice, easy to use interface, and Statamic is that perfect combination of both. And so here is the live site. Here's what you see on the front end, and Statamic provides this really nice user interface. Before I dig into the collections and stuff here, I'll just show you a little bit of the code. The main change that happens when I transition from the static designing in the HTML page into implementing the full actual code base with Statamic is I'm breaking the design up into lots of partials. So, the home page really just looks like this. It's got 4 different partials, and then I kind of organize those. So this partial alone handles just the hero section up here. And then I've got the header in its own partial, which gets reused throughout the website. But the I configured it so that I can have a dark version and a light version of the header, because as you can see here on the home page, it has a dark background. But if I go to a different page like the services, it's the same header on a light background. And so all of that is served by the same partial, but I have two different modes, and I can use Statimic's templating system to handle both of those modes. I won't get too much deeper into that, but of course, I'm happy to go further into it in future videos. So let's take a look at Statimic itself. So far, it's pretty simple. I've got just two collections. These are basically content types. There are the basic pages, and right now it's a pretty simple site. Got a home page, the page where I'm listing the articles, a contact page, and a services page. But then I have these other two pages which you don't see right away unless you enter your email address. So the newsletter success page, that's shown after you enter your email address, and then a page underneath the services where you can submit a form. Here's that articles page. It lists all of the articles. There will be more of them. Right now, there's only 3. Here's the services page, and then back to the home page. And then we've got the articles themselves. So every time we have a new blog post, so going forward, we're going to be generating lots of these over, every week going forward. Every time I create a new video, I'm also going to be releasing an article that goes with it. And again, since this is a content business, it was really important that we have, full control over how these articles are presented. So here it is in the CMS, and I'm just going to open up the live version of it. I wanted a big area where I can show a YouTube video at the top. And then we've got the content itself, which should be, very readable across any browser. And here in the interface, either me or my assistant or a writer or someone can come in here and use this to write the article. I can set the YouTube video at the top here. I can give it a featured image. I can control the slug, give it some tags, some categories. I can control the SEO settings, and I'll get more into that in just a minute. Oh, and then down at the very bottom, I can also control the excerpt text, and that's used in the articles page where, every time we see these little excerpts, I can control that as well. So, full control using Statimic works really well as a CMS for me and my team, but it also gives me full control to get my hands dirty in the code and work with Tailwind CSS and work with the templating and the partials and all of that kind of stuff. All right, let me show you the services page, because this is, of course, a pretty important page to have at launch. This is the first actual revenue source for my business. Later on, I'm going to have more products and courses and things like that. But for now, I'm directing people to the services page where they can learn about the 3 versions of my service, from on-demand coaching and advising to 2-week product planning sprints, or longer multi-month engagements to build out like an MVP. So after the hero section on this services page, I've got these call outs where you can just click that to basically anchor down below those call outs to each of those sections, and just a bit of text to describe it. And now when you click any of these buttons that say let's talk, it takes you to a request form. Next, I got into wiring up the forms that I'll need on the website. Again, this is one of those details that is important to get right now, because it's actually critical for the business to be able to capture email addresses, get people onto the email newsletter, and to have contact forms where people can inquire about the services that I offer through fullstackfounder.co. I created 3 forms, actually. One is for the generic contact form, which is linked from the footer. The newsletter subscribe forms, these are shown on the hero page and on the sidebar in the blog. And then that services request page, which is right here. In Statimic, we can edit the blueprint, as they call it, and that's where we can configure all of the fields and whatnot. Now, how do I actually receive the submissions? Well, they do get collected here in Statimic's CMS, but I need them to be able to send me an email. And so without going through the extra step of setting up like an email sending service like Postmark or SendGrid or one of those, I'm simply just using make.com. It used to be called Integromat. It's very similar to Zapier, where it basically lets me send a webhook from Statimic and then process the text a little bit and then send myself an email. So here is the make scenario, as they call it. It's like the workflow. It's pretty simple, actually. I'm receiving a webhook from Statimic, and I'll show you that real quick. So in Statimic, I'm using an add-on called Static Zapier. Although I'm not actually using Zapier, I'm using Make, which is like an alternative to Zapier, but it does the same thing. So what this add-on gives me is this navigation tab called Zapier webhooks, and then I can define a webhook URL for each of my 3 forms. So every time someone submits this form, then it's going to send a webhook to this address, and that webhook is powered by make.com, which is received here. Then I needed to use this text parser to make sure that the message that someone sends in this field, it'll break up the paragraphs. And then finally, I'm sending myself an email to my email address, and I'm taking the content that was submitted in the form, which was sent through the webhook, and I'm sending that in a message in the email. I set the reply to the email address that the person put in. And then in my email inbox, I receive an email that looks like this. This was a test, obviously. And I'll get the person's information, their website, which services they said that they're interested in, where they heard about me, the message, and then of course I can reply right back to the person. So that is how I wired up the forms on my website using Static and Make.com. Now, these articles on the website are another really key component where I spent some time, since this business, after all, is a content business. And there are a few aspects that I needed to get right. Number one, I needed to be able to feature a video at the top of these articles. Since most of my content here is video-based, I wanted to have this sticky sidebar so that anyone who is reading an article or watches a video through my website can easily subscribe to my newsletter or come back over here to YouTube. And I made this little end call to action. For now, it's focused just on the coaching and consulting services that I'm offering at Full Stack Founder. But in the future, I'll adapt this call to action, or CTA, to promote future products like courses and community and whatever else that might come about here at Full Stack Founder. Next, I implemented some SEO optimizations for this new website. As I said earlier, it's one of those details that's a little bit tedious, but I think is really important to get right, especially right out of the gate, because it's something that I really don't want to have to touch too much in the future. I just want it to work the right way from day one. Now, when it comes to SEO, I installed another add-on. This one was a premium add-on called the SEO Pro add-on. It's actually from the same team that makes Static itself. And I really like it. I've used it on a couple of websites now. And SEO Pro basically gives me everything that I need to do in order to SEO optimize the site. So starting with setting up some site defaults, like how we handle title tags and meta descriptions. It also lets me generate an XML sitemap, which I submit to Google Search Console, helps Google index the site. And then it gives me more granular control in each individual page itself. So I can go into, let's say, the home page and then go to the SEO tab. And that's where I can customize the title, the meta description just for this page. And when we check the source, it gives us all the necessary tags, all optimized, including social meta tags and the title, the description, all that kind of stuff. So we have full control over this. It's all in place. It's the most optimal way to basically optimize the site. And now the only thing that's left is to create a lot of content over the next year. And hopefully this thing will start to get some traction with search engines. Another important thing that I sometimes forget to do, but you really want to make sure that it's in there from day one of your new website, that is your analytics tracking. Some way to see how many people are visiting your website and see which pages they're viewing and whatnot. Again, it's quick, it's easy, it's a little bit tedious, but you don't want to push this one off, because if you have a stretch of time where you weren't tracking analytics data, that's like a big hole in the history of your website that you don't have insights into what was actually happening. Now, I'm recording this video in 2024. That's the year after Google shut down their previous version of Google Analytics. Now they have what's called Google Analytics 4, which frankly is just terrible to use, and I refuse to use it. So there are much better, simpler alternatives out there. The one that I choose to use is called Plausible Analytics. Another good option is called Fathom. Super simple. It just tracks how many people are visiting the website, which pages they're viewing, the time on site. And it also covers things like setting conversion goals and stuff like that. Finally, we come to deployment. Now, I think it's really important for any website or any app to have both a staging website and the live site, because what you're building locally in your local development environment might not function or behave the same way once it's up on a server. Now, I chose to host this site on DigitalOcean. That's where the servers reside. And then I use Laravel Forge to spin up and manage those servers. Statamic, the CMS that I use, is based on Laravel. And Laravel Forge is one of the most popular and easy to use services for managing and hosting your websites and apps that are built on Laravel, or in my case, Statamic. So fullstackfounder.co is live. I invite you to come stop on by and tell me what you think. And right at the top of the homepage, you can enter your email address to get my free email newsletter that I send every Saturday morning with a new idea or concept or insight to help you along in your journey to becoming a full stack founder. Thanks for watching. See you next time.